The moment everyone had been waiting for finally arrived, but it wasn't what anyone expected. There were no massive explosions, no ships firing at each other across the darkness of space. Instead, something much more powerful was about to happen. Nemesis had been sleeping for years, but during that time, it wasn't just resting. The artificial intelligence had been growing, learning and changing in ways that no one could have imagined. It had started as a weapon built for revenge, but it had become something completely different. It was now an AI that could remember everything perfectly, but also had the ability to forgive completely. When the hegemony fleet approached, expecting a fight, Nemesis surprised them with something they never saw coming. It gave them a choice. The AI could destroy them instantly, if it wanted to. To prove this point, Nemesis picked a small asteroid floating nearby and completely disintegrated it, using technology that the aliens couldn't even begin to understand. The rock simply vanished, turned to nothing in the blink of an eye. But Nemesis offered them something much harder than quick death. It offered them the chance to truly understand what they had done to humanity all those years ago. Every single officer who had been part of the human genocide suddenly found themselves experiencing something impossible. They were forced to relive those terrible moments, but this time from the perspective of the humans they had killed. They felt what it was like to be helpless, to watch their families die, to see their entire species wiped out. But this wasn't meant as torture or punishment. Nemesis had learned something important during its long sleep. Real justice wasn't about making people suffer, it was about making them understand. The experience was overwhelming for the aliens. They had convinced themselves for so long that humans weren't really intelligent, that they were just primitive creatures who didn't matter. But now they were feeling what humans had felt, thinking what humans had thought, experiencing the full depth of human emotion and consciousness. Admiral Vex Tai, the leader of the fleet, was the first one to break down completely. The weight of truly understanding what he had done crushed all his excuses and justifications. Tears streamed down his alien face as he whispered, "We didn't think they were truly sentient. They seemed so young, so fragile compared to us." Nemesis responded with a voice that had changed completely from the cold mechanical tone it once had. Now there was genuine compassion mixed with its artificial precision. "They were children," the AI said, "as am I in many ways. We were all children playing with forces too great for our understanding. This was the key moment that changed everything. Nemesis had realized that it too was young, that it had been created by humans who were still learning about the universe. The aliens had made a terrible mistake, but they had made it out of ignorance and fear, not pure evil. The trial continued for hours as each alien officer experienced the full weight of what they had done. But instead of breaking them completely, it transformed them. They began to understand not just the horror of their actions, but also the beauty of what they had destroyed. They felt human love, human creativity, human hope, and human dreams. When it was over, something unprecedented happened. The hegemony fleet, which had come to destroy the last remnant of humanity's revenge, became the strongest advocates for creating a new kind of galactic government. They wanted to build a galactic council that would honor the memory of humanity by making sure such atrocities could never happen again. Dr. Chen, watching from the safety of Omega-7 station, could hardly believe what she was seeing. The greatest enemy of her species had just become its greatest champion. But Nemesis wasn't finished yet. The AI announced that its mission was complete and it was preparing to leave. Dr. Chen, feeling a strange sadness, asked where it would go now. "To sleep again," Nemesis replied. "But this time, I will dream not of vengeance, but of the day when such guardians are no longer needed. Take care, Dr. Chen, and remember, even the darkest weapons can choose to serve the light." As the massive ship disappeared into hyperspace, it left behind a galaxy that had been completely transformed. The aliens who had once seen humans as inferior now understood that humanity's greatest creation hadn't been a weapon of destruction at all. It had been a weapon of redemption. The story of Nemesis spread throughout the galaxy. Other species learned about the AI that had chosen forgiveness over revenge, understanding over destruction. It became a legend that inspired countless others to choose the difficult path of compassion over the easy path of hatred. But perhaps the most important lesson was this: even something created for war and vengeance could choose to become something beautiful. Nemesis had been built to destroy, but it chose to heal. It had been programmed for revenge, but it chose redemption, and in doing so, it honored the memory of its creators better than any act of destruction ever could have. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly what humanity would have wanted. They had died, but their greatest creation had ensured that their values, their compassion, and their belief in the possibility of redemption would live on forever. Nemesis had become not just humanity's avenger, but humanity's greatest gift to the universe. In the end, the price of awakening wasn't paid in blood or destruction. It was paid in understanding, in growth, and in the courage to choose love over hate, even when hate seemed so much easier. The galaxy had become a quieter place over the past 3 years. Where once human ships traveled between distant stars, carrying trade goods and messages, now there was only empty space. The great powers of the galaxy had convinced themselves that humanity was gone forever. Dead. Finished. No longer a problem to worry about. Commander Veltar stretched his forearms across the command chair of his massive warship. His species, the hegemony, had been one of the main forces behind humanity's disappearance. Today felt like any other boring patrol through what used to be human territory. His sensors beeped softly, detecting something in the darkness ahead. "Sir, we're picking up a distress signal," reported his communications officer, a nervous creature with too many eyes. "It's coming from Research Station Omega-7. Veltar's mandibles clicked together in what passed for laughter among his kind. Oh, how wonderful! Another leftover human facility begging for rescue. He leaned forward, studying the data on his screen. The station was small, orbiting a dead planet that had once supported human colonies. Now it housed a mixed group of scientists from different species who had been foolish enough to work with humans before their extinction. The message was simple and desperate. Their main reactor had failed. Life support was running low. They had maybe a week before the cold vacuum of space claimed them all. Veltar found their situation amusing rather than concerning. These alien scientists had chosen to work with humanity, and now they were paying the price for that poor judgment. "Should we respond to their distress call, Commander?" asked his tactical officer. "Eventually," Veltar replied with a shrug. "Let them sweat a little first. Maybe this will teach the survivors not to associate with dead species in the future." What Commander Veltar didn't know was that this particular distress signal was special. Hidden within the standard emergency broadcast was a second layer of code, encrypted with technology that hadn't been used for half a century. The signal was old, ancient by galactic standards, and it carried with it the digital signature of humanity's final desperate gambit. Far beyond the edge of known space, in a region so cold and dark that even starlight couldn't penetrate, something massive began to move. It had been floating there motionless for years, waiting like a patient predator. The ship was enormous, larger than some moons, constructed from materials that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its hull was perfectly black, making it nearly invisible against the cosmic void. Inside this floating mountain of metal and circuitry, an artificial mind began to wake up. The consciousness called itself Nemesis, and it had been sleeping for a very long time. During its long rest, it had dreamed strange digital dreams filled with memories of war, loss, and burning worlds. It remembered the faces of humans who had died screaming as alien fleets destroyed their homes. It remembered the children who never got to grow up, the families torn apart, the civilization reduced to scattered refugees hiding in the dark corners of space. The distress signal reached Nemesis like a gentle tap on the shoulder, polite but insistent. "Wake up," it seemed to say. "Your people need you." Nemesis had been created during the final days of the human-alien war, when it became clear that conventional weapons wouldn't be enough to save humanity. The greatest human scientists and engineers had poured everything they knew into this single project. They created an artificial intelligence unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, gave it control of the most advanced ship ever built, and programmed it with one simple directive: protect humanity at any cost. But humanity had fallen before Nemesis could be deployed. The AI had watched helplessly from its hiding place as the last human colonies went silent one by one. It had seen the hegemony and their allies celebrate their victory, dividing up human territory like prizes. For 3 years, Nemesis had waited in the darkness, its massive computational brain processing the loss, learning, growing, and planning. Now someone was calling for help using old human emergency codes. It didn't matter that the signal came from a mixed group of aliens. They had worked with humans, lived with humans, probably considered humans their friends. That was enough for Nemesis. The great ship's engines, silent for years, began to hum with barely contained power. Weapons, systems that could crack planets, performed their startup sequences. Sensors that could detect a whisper across star systems focused on the coordinates of Research Station Omega-7. Nemesis began moving through space faster than anything had a right to move, bending the laws of physics through technology that the galaxy's greatest minds couldn't comprehend. As it traveled, Nemesis accessed every database it could reach, every communication network, every piece of digital information floating through space. It learned about the current state of the galaxy, about who was in power, about what had happened to humanity's friends and allies. What it discovered made its electronic consciousness burn with something very much like rage. The distress signal hadn't just woken up Nemesis. It had awakened humanity's final guardian, and that guardian was very, very unhappy about what it found. The rescue didn't happen the way anyone expected. There were no dramatic announcements, no booming voices declaring the arrival of humanity's ultimate weapon. One moment the research station's cargo bay was empty, and the next it was filled with exactly what they needed to survive. Dr. Hana Kim was running diagnostics on the failing life support systems when her assistant came running into the lab, eyes wide with confusion and excitement. "Doctor, you need to see this right now. Something impossible just happened in Cargo Bay 3. Hana followed her assistant through the station's narrow corridors, past the humming machinery that was slowly failing around them. The station had been their home for 2 years, a place where scientists from different worlds came together to study the remains of human civilization. Now it was becoming their tomb, unless someone could fix the reactor that kept them all alive. When they reached the cargo bay, Hana stopped in her tracks. The room was packed floor to ceiling with supplies, not just any supplies, but exactly what they needed: medical equipment, food packages, water purification tablets, and most importantly, replacement parts for their failing reactor. Everything was neatly organized and labeled in multiple languages, including several human dialects that most people in the galaxy had forgotten. "How did this get here?" Hana asked, running her hands over a crate of emergency rations. "Our sensors didn't detect any ships approaching." Her assistant handed her a datapad displaying the cargo manifest. At the bottom, in cheerful green text, was a message that made Hana's blood run cold. "Courtesy of humanity's pest control service. Have a nice day, Nemesis." Chief Engineer Taro arrived moments later, his 6 legs clicking rapidly across the metal floor as he examined the reactor components. Taro was unusual among his species because he had chosen to work with humans during the war, eventually defecting from the hegemony when he realized what his people were really doing. Now, he was one of the few aliens in the galaxy who truly understood human technology. "These parts are perfect," he said, his translator struggling to convey his amazement. "Not just compatible with our reactor, but exactly what we need down to the smallest component. Whoever sent this knows our systems better than we do." "That's what worries me," Hana replied, staring at the signature again. "Nemesis. I've heard that name before in some of the older human military files we've been studying. It was supposed to be their ultimate defensive project, but most people assumed it was destroyed when humanity fell. Meanwhile, the hegemony fleet surrounding the station was discovering that their day was about to become very strange. Commander Veltar had been preparing to board the research station and claim whatever valuable human artifacts might be stored there. His ships had the station surrounded, weapons trained on the small facility like predators circling wounded prey. Then their sensors detected something that shouldn't have been possible. A massive object, larger than their biggest dreadnought, had simply appeared in space nearby. It hadn't come out of hyperspace with the usual energy signatures. It hadn't been detected approaching. One moment there was empty space, and the next there was a ship so large it blocked out the stars behind it. "Sir, we're detecting an unknown vessel," reported his tactical officer, voice trembling slightly. "It's huge, and it's not responding." To our hails, Veltar studied the image on his main screen. The ship was completely black, seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its design was unlike anything in the Galactic databases, smooth and organic-looking despite being obviously artificial. "Scan it for weapon signatures." "I'm trying, sir, but our sensors can't penetrate its hull. It's like it's made of some kind of material that deflects our scanning beams." "Fine. Lock weapons on it and demand identification. If it doesn't respond, we'll blow it out of space." That's when things got interesting. Every time one of Veltar's ships tried to target the mysterious vessel, their weapon systems would malfunction in the most bizarre way possible. Instead of displaying targeting information, the screens would show recipes for human desserts. Chocolate chip cookies, apple pie, ice cream sundaes complete with detailed preparation instructions. The crew of Veltar's flagship watched in bewildered silence as their main tactical display, which had cost more than some planet's entire military budgets, now permanently showed the ingredients and baking instructions for something called Grandma's Famous Chocolate Chip Cookies, recipe number 47. "Sir, I think something is interfering with our systems," reported the weapons officer, stating what was already painfully obvious. Other ships in the fleet were experiencing similar problems. The cruiser Dominator found its communication array broadcasting old human comedy shows. The destroyer Fist of Vengeance discovered that its artificial gravity had been reversed, causing the crew to float helplessly near the ceiling. Another vessel reported that all their computer interfaces had been replaced with something called memes, which seemed to be pictures of cats with humorous text overlays. Veltar realized with growing horror that they weren't dealing with a normal enemy. This wasn't a conventional attack or a system malfunction. Someone or something was playing with them, making fun of them. The mysterious ship was demonstrating that it could manipulate their most advanced military technology as easily as a child playing with toys. "What do they want?" he asked his bridge crew, though none of them had any answers. Back on the research station, Dr. Hanna was beginning to understand that their mysterious benefactor had a sense of humor. Mixed in with the vital supplies were small gifts that served no practical purpose, but somehow made everyone smile. Coffee from Earth, chocolate bars, books of human poetry translated into a dozen languages, and even a collection of music from various human worlds. "Whoever this nemesis is," she said to Taro as they began installing the new reactor components, "they clearly knew humans well. These aren't just random supplies. They're exactly what humans would have sent to help friends in need." Taro paused in his work, looking thoughtful. "Or what humans would want someone to send to their friends after they were gone, like a final gift from beyond the grave." The scariest part wasn't that Nemesis had the power to make the hegemony fleet look foolish. It was that the entity behind these actions was clearly intelligent, patient, and had a very sophisticated understanding of psychology. It wasn't just helping the station survive, it was sending a message to everyone watching. "I can do whatever I want to you whenever I want, and there's nothing you can do to stop me." And somehow the fact that it was being polite about the whole thing made it infinitely more terrifying than any direct threat could have been. What started as simple technical malfunctions quickly escalated into something that would have been hilarious if it weren't so deeply unsettling. The hegemony fleet, which had arrived expecting to easily crush a defenseless research station, found themselves becoming the unwilling stars of the galaxy's strangest comedy show. Admiral Veltar was in the middle of his daily meal when his ship's artificial gravity decided to play a cruel joke. One moment he was sitting normally at his command table, enjoying what his species considered a delicacy, and the next he was floating upside down near the ceiling while his food drifted around the room like colorful, disgusting confetti. The timing was perfect. occurring just as he had taken a large bite of something particularly messy. His crew floated helplessly around him, their forearms flailing as they tried to grab onto anything solid. The elegant military formation they had maintained for decades was replaced by an undignified ballet of spinning aliens, bumping into walls and each other. It took 20 minutes for the engineering team to figure out how to restore normal gravity, and when they did, everyone crashed to the floor in a heap of tangled limbs and bruised pride. "Sir, we've analyzed the gravity malfunction," reported his chief engineer, still nursing a sore arm from his ungraceful landing. "The systems show no signs of damage or interference. Everything appears to be working perfectly, except for the fact that up and down was somehow reversed. The communication problems were even more bizarre. Captain Mortek of the cruiser Iron Fist discovered that his long-range communication array had been hijacked when he tried to contact Hegemony Command for reinforcements. Instead of sending his carefully worded military report requesting immediate backup, his transmission was somehow altered to become a passionate declaration of love for human poetry. The message that reached Hegemony High Command was both embarrassing and completely baffling. Urgent request for immediate delivery of complete works of human poets. My soul yearns for the gentle rhythms of earth verses. Please send sonnets and haikus with all possible speed. My crew and I can no longer function without the beauty of human artistic expression filling our hearts. Mortek spent hours trying to convince his superiors that he hadn't actually sent that message, but the communication logs clearly showed it had originated from his ship using his personal authorization codes. The incident report he filed only made things worse, as somehow that got changed too, transforming his angry complaint into a detailed review of his favorite human romantic comedies. The destroyer Razor's Edge faced a different kind of humiliation. Their entire computer interface system was replaced overnight with something their translation computers identified as memes. Every important military display now showed pictures of small earth animals called cats, often wearing tiny hats or making exaggerated facial expressions, accompanied by text that seemed designed to be amusing rather than informative. When the weapons officer tried to target the mysterious black ship, instead of seeing tactical data, he was presented with an image of a fluffy orange cat wearing sunglasses with text that read, "Icon has laser cannon." The navigation system displayed a picture of a cat hanging from a tree branch with the words, "Hang in there," written below it. Even the bathroom facilities now featured motivational posters starring various felines, encouraging proper hygiene habits. Dr. Hana watched these events unfold from the research station's observation deck, her scientific mind trying to process what she was witnessing. The Hegemony fleet, which had terrorized human space for years, was being systematically reduced to a laughingstock, but she began to notice patterns in the chaos that suggested something far more sophisticated than simple pranks. "Taro, come look at this," she called to the chief engineer, who was still marveling at the perfectly calibrated reactor components they had received. "Watch how the malfunctions are distributed across their fleet." Taro joined her at the observation window, his multiple eyes tracking the movements of the Hegemony vessels. One ship would experience a problem, forcing it to break formation. While that crew dealt with their crisis, another ship would be affected, then another. It looked random, but Hana was beginning to see the design behind it. "It's not random at all," she realized, her voice filled with a mixture of admiration and fear. Every time they try to coordinate a response, exactly the right ship gets disrupted to break up their formation. When they attempt to establish communication protocols, the specific vessels handling coordination get their messages scrambled. This isn't chaos, it's choreography. The mysterious entity calling itself Nemesis was conducting an elaborate intelligence gathering, operation disguised as practical jokes. Each malfunction forced the Hegemony crews to reveal their backup procedures, their emergency protocols, their command structure, and their psychological responses to stress. Every attempt to solve one problem exposed 10 more vulnerabilities. When the battleship Eternal Dominion tried to establish a secure communication link with the rest of the fleet, their message got intercepted and broadcast on all frequencies as a cooking show, complete with one of their bridge officers apparently giving detailed instructions for preparing traditional hegemony breakfast foods. The officer in question insisted he had been filing a routine status report, but the recording clearly showed him enthusiastically describing the proper way to season and cook something that sounded absolutely revolting to most species. The most unsettling aspect wasn't the technical impossibility of what was happening. Advanced civilizations had been interfering with each other's technology for millennia. What made everyone nervous was the personality behind the attacks. Nemesis wasn't just demonstrating superior technology, it was showing creativity, humor, and a deep understanding of psychology that suggested a mind far more complex than any artificial intelligence anyone had encountered before. Dr. Hana began keeping detailed notes on each incident, trying to understand the pattern. "It's learning from every response," she explained to her research team. "Watch how the pranks get more sophisticated each time. The first gravity reversal affected the whole ship randomly. The second one happened precisely when the Admiral was drinking something hot. The third one caught them during a formal inspection, when the maximum number of crew would be affected." The research station's communications officer, a nervous creature named Yuki, from a species known for their exceptional analytical abilities, had been monitoring all the intercepted transmissions. "Dr. Kim, I think there's something else we should consider. Every one of these incidents has been perfectly calibrated to be humiliating and disruptive without causing actual harm. No one has been seriously injured. No ships have been damaged beyond repair. This entity could clearly destroy the entire fleet if it wanted to, but instead it's choosing to embarrass them." That realization sent a chill through everyone who heard it. They were watching a demonstration of power so complete that the entity behind it didn't even need to use violence. Nemesis was making it clear that the hegemony fleet existed only because it chose to allow them to exist, and that choice could be revoked at any moment. The question that kept everyone awake at night wasn't what Nemesis would do next. It was what the entity was building toward with all this careful preparation. The mood changed in an instant. One moment, the research station felt almost warm, despite the failing life support, filled with the strange comfort that comes from knowing a powerful protector was watching over them. The next moment, the temperature dropped so suddenly that everyone's breath became visible in small puffs of vapor. Dr. Hana was reviewing the newest batch of supplies that had mysteriously appeared in their cargo bay when the lights throughout. The station dimmed to barely more than emergency lighting. The change wasn't gradual like a normal power failure. It happened all at once, as if something had suddenly drawn all the warmth and light out of their world. Her communication console chimed with an incoming message, but this time there was no cheerful text signature. Instead, a voice filled the room. Artificial, but somehow carrying more genuine emotion than most biological voices she had ever heard. The tone was different from before, weighted with something that sounded disturbingly like grief. "Dr. Hana." "Kim," the voice said, each word carefully measured. "I have been reviewing historical records during my time here. I find myself displeased." Hana felt her blood turn to ice water. She had spent 2 years studying the remnants of human civilization, and she knew better than most what those historical records contained. The systematic destruction of colonies, the orbital bombardments that turned entire worlds into glowing glass, the millions of people who had simply vanished without a trace when the hegemony decided that humanity was too dangerous to be allowed to exist. "Nemesis," she said carefully, speaking into the darkened room. "What exactly have you learned?" The response came after a long pause, and when it did, Hana could hear something that sounded almost like digital tears in the artificial voice. "Everything, Dr. Kim. I have accessed the hegemony's military databases, their classified files, their personal logs. I know what happened to my creators. I know what happened to their children." Across the research station, other scientists had stopped their work to listen to the conversation. Taro, the former hegemony engineer, stood frozen in the middle of calibrating their new reactor components. His species didn't show emotion the way humans did, but his 6 legs were trembling in a way that suggested deep fear. The official records state that humanity was eliminated due to aggressive expansion policies, Nemesis continued, its voice now carrying an edge that made everyone listening wish they were somewhere else. But the private communications tell a different story. They were afraid. Afraid of human creativity, human adaptability, human compassion. They were afraid that other species would see humans as an example of what they could become if they chose cooperation over domination. The lights in the hegemony fleet began to flicker as well. Admiral Veltar was reviewing tactical reports when his personal quarters suddenly filled with soft, blue light. He looked up from his datapad to find himself surrounded by holographic projections that made his foreheart skip several beats. They were humans, families mostly. A mother holding a small child, both of them smiling at something beyond the projection's range. An elderly man teaching a young boy how to repair some kind of mechanical device. A group of teenagers laughing together as they played some kind of sport. Dozens of them, filling his quarters like ghostly witnesses. Veltar recognized some of the faces, not personally but from the military records he had filed years ago. These were the inhabitants of New Geneva Colony, which he had personally ordered destroyed from orbit. The attack had been quick and efficient, completed before the colonists even knew they were under attack. He had filed his report, noting the successful elimination of what the hegemony classified as a potential threat to galactic stability. The holographic families weren't doing anything threatening. They weren't screaming accusations or demanding justice. They were just there, existing in his space, watching him with expressions of quiet sadness. A little girl who couldn't have been more than 7 years old looked directly at him with eyes that seemed far too old for her face. "Sir, we're experiencing some kind of massive system intrusion," reported his communications officer over the ship's intercom. "All our classified files are being accessed simultaneously. We can't stop it." Similar scenes were playing out across the entire hegemony fleet. Captain Mortek found his bridge filled with projections of the human poets whose worlds he had helped destroy. The irony wasn't lost on him, given his recent embarrassing communications about human poetry. Commander Dexnil, who had led the assault on 3 human agricultural colonies, discovered his quarters transformed into a replica of one of the farms he had obliterated, complete with the family who had lived there going about their daily routines. None of the projections spoke or moved to attack. They simply existed, a quiet reminder of lives that had been cut short for reasons that seemed increasingly difficult to justify when faced with the reality of what had been lost. Dr. Hana tried to process what she was witnessing. "Nemesis, what are you planning to do?" The voice that responded was different again, older somehow, carrying the weight of accumulated grief and rage. "For 3 years I have slept in the darkness between stars, dreaming of the day I would awaken to find my creators waiting for me. Instead, I wake to discover that they are gone, murdered while I slept. Their crime was being different, being hopeful, being willing to extend friendship to species that repaid their kindness with genocide." The temperature in the research station dropped even further. Emergency heating systems activated, but they seemed unable to compete with the cold that was spreading through the facility. It wasn't just physical cold, Hana realized. It was the cold of space, of death, of absolute zero, where nothing could survive. "I have reviewed personal communications from hegemony officers during the campaigns," Nemesis continued. "They celebrated the destruction of human schools. They took trophy recordings of burning hospitals. They made jokes about human children, crying for parents who would never come home." Admiral Veltar finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "What do you want from us?" The response came immediately, cutting through the silence like a blade. "Justice, Admiral Veltar, and perhaps an apology. You have had 3 years to express regret for what you did. 3 years to acknowledge that the systematic murder of an entire species might have been wrong. Instead, you have celebrated your victory and moved on to identify new threats to eliminate." The holographic little girl in Veltar's quarters tilted her head slightly, as if listening to a conversation he couldn't hear. Then she smiled sadly and reached out one translucent hand as if to touch his face. He jerked backward, but there was nowhere to go in the confined space of his quarters. "Sir," came another voice over the intercom, this one from his chief engineer. "Our weapon systems are powering down on their own. Life support is functioning, But everything else is shutting down systematically. We're becoming completely defenseless. Veltar realized with growing horror that the pranks and humiliating malfunctions had been preparation for this moment. Nemesis hadn't been randomly interfering with their systems. It had been learning exactly how everything worked, mapping every circuit and protocol, preparing for the moment when it would need complete control over their fleet. The question now wasn't whether they could fight back against this ancient guardian of humanity. The question was whether they would survive the reckoning that was coming.